Downtown buzzed like usual. Tourists snapped photos, office workers streamed into cafes, and traffic hummed with energy. It was 12:47 p.m. when Danielle Roberts stepped into Maple and Sage, one of the city's most talked about restaurants. She didn't look like someone who owned anything. That was on purpose. Danielle wore a simple cream blouse tucked into navy slacks, no makeup, and her natural hair pulled back into a bun. No one noticed the soft confidence in her walk, the kind that came from building something from scratch. This was her restaurant. But today, like every other Friday, she came in without announcing herself. It was how she tested her staff's integrity. Except, this time, something felt different. "Good afternoon," she greeted softly, approaching the hostess stand. The white hostess didn't look up from her phone. Danielle waited. Still nothing. She cleared her throat. "Excuse me, is it okay if I sit by the window?" Now the hostess looked up, with an expression Danielle hadn't seen since high school. Are you here for takeout?" Danielle blinked. "No, dine-in." A pause. Then came the smirk. "We're kinda full right now." Danielle turned her head. At least 7 empty tables were clearly visible. "I don't mind waiting." "There's no wait list." A couple, white, mid-30s, walked in behind Danielle. "Two for lunch?" The hostess beamed. "Of course. Right this way." She chirped, grabbing menus. Danielle stared in disbelief. "Wait," she said. "You just told me there were no tables." The hostess turned. "That's because we're not serving everyone today. We've had issues." "What kind of issues?" A manager in a black shirt peeked from the back. Danielle recognized her. Jessica, newly hired 2 weeks ago. Jessica walked over. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, smile tight. Danielle replied calmly, "I've just been told I can't be seated despite the tables being open." Jessica's eyes flicked to the hostess, then back to Danielle. "Well, our team reserves the right to refuse service, especially when we're at capacity or under pressure." Danielle raised an eyebrow. "You're at capacity?" Jessica didn't answer. Then the hostess added, "Look, we've had some difficult customers lately, and we're trying to keep the atmosphere pleasant, okay?" "Difficult," Danielle echoed. "You don't even know me." Jessica stepped closer, lowered her voice. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "For what reason?" Jessica exhaled, annoyed now. "You're being confrontational. This is a peaceful establishment." Danielle's heart pounded, the same words she'd heard growing up in white neighborhoods. Confrontational. Issues. Not today. She looked around. People were watching, but not helping. One couple even whispered and laughed. Then came the final blow. The hostess muttered just loud enough, "This is why we don't let just anyone walk in off the street." Danielle froze. Every muscle in her body stiffened. But she didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "Get me your manager. Now." Jessica snapped, "I am the manager." Danielle's eyes narrowed. So this is how they treat black women when they think no one is watching. She took a slow breath and sat at the nearest table without waiting for permission. "I suggest you bring your real manager," she said, her voice firm, "because what happens next will be on you." Danielle sat there, calm on the outside, storming on the inside. The small silver fork on the table trembled ever so slightly in her hand, but she kept her face composed. She stared out the window, not because the view was pretty, but to stop herself from crying or screaming. This wasn't just about lunch. It was about every quiet humiliation she had swallowed to be where she was. Across the room, Jessica, the manager, was pacing. "You need to get her out." She hissed to the hostess. The hostess wrinkled her nose. "Should we call security?" Jessica glanced toward Danielle, then quickly nodded. "Call them. Tell them we've got someone refusing to leave." The hostess picked up the phone with a grin like it was the highlight of her shift. Danielle watched all of it unfold, heart pounding. She heard the words clearly. Yes, black female, early 30s, refusing to leave the premises. Yes, she's being aggressive. Danielle's lips parted slightly. Aggressive? She hadn't moved. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't touched anyone. But they were crafting a narrative, a dangerous one. She stood slowly and walked to the front counter. The restaurant grew quiet. Even the couple from earlier put down their forks. Jessica crossed her arms. "You're only making this worse for yourself." Danielle leaned in, quietly, confidently. "Are you sure this is the choice you want to make?" Jessica's brows lifted. "Are you threatening me?" Danielle almost laughed. "No, I'm giving you a chance to fix this before it ruins your career." The front door opened. A tall white security officer in uniform stepped in. His eyes landed on Danielle, and immediately his hand went to his belt. Jessica pointed. "That's her. She's been causing a scene." The officer approached. "Ma'am, I need you to step outside." "On what grounds?" Danielle asked, still calm. "You're disrupting business." Danielle turned to him slowly. "Would you like to know who I am before you escort me out of my own restaurant?" A beat of silence. Jessica scoffed. "Your restaurant?" Danielle reached into her bag and pulled out a leather folder. Inside was a framed document, gold-sealed, crystal clear. Owner, Danielle Roberts. The security guard stared. So did everyone else. Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. "This is a joke." Danielle handed the document to the officer. "You were about to forcibly remove the legal owner of this establishment because two of your staff didn't think I belonged here." Jessica stammered. You didn't say anything." "I was waiting," Danielle said, "to see how far you'd go." And they did. All the way. The silence in Maple and Sage was thick enough to cut with a knife. Danielle stood at the center of the restaurant, no longer just a woman in beige. She was now a storm wrapped in silk, the owner they all tried to humiliate. The hostess, still gripping the phone, looked pale. Jessica, the manager, was frozen in place. Customers whispered, phones still recording. Danielle turned to the security officer. "Thank you for coming. You're dismissed." He nodded, embarrassed, and walked out without another word. Jessica stepped forward, voice trembling. I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" Danielle cut in, her voice steady. "Didn't know your job? Didn't know how to treat a paying customer? Or didn't know that black women can own places like this?" Jessica flinched. Danielle didn't blink. "Call the head chef and the staff. Right now. I want everyone out here in 5 minutes." Jessica hesitated. "I said now." She obeyed. 5 minutes later, the kitchen doors swung open, and a small group of stunned employees stood in a crooked line. Chefs, waiters, kitchen aides, all whispering, unsure why they'd been called. Danielle stood in front of them, her framed ownership document still in hand. She looked each one in the eye. "For those of you who don't know me," she began, "I'm Danielle Roberts, founder, creator, and sole owner of this restaurant. Every plate, every recipe, every paycheck comes from me." The room was silent. "I have been walking into this restaurant every Friday for 2 months to observe. Not once have I been treated like a human being." She turned slowly to the hostess. "You ignored me, lied to me, and humiliated me on camera." The hostess burst into tears. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't mean." Danielle raised a hand. "You did. You meant every word. You just didn't think you'd face consequences." Then she looked at Jessica. You're a liability. You made a phone call that could have gotten me arrested, or worse. And for what? Because I made you uncomfortable just by existing in a space I owned?" Jessica's lips quivered. "Please. I have a family." Danielle stepped closer. "So do I. And that didn't matter to you when you called me aggressive and threatened me." She turned to the staff. "Anyone who stood by and watched, anyone who thought I was less than you because of how I look, you're part of the problem." Then came the moment the audience had been waiting for. Danielle pulled out 2 white envelopes from her bag. "Jessica, Claire," she said, handing one to the manager and the other to the hostess. "Your services are no longer required. Clear your lockers." A gasp rippled through the room. "But," Jessica started. "No buts," Danielle said. "I built this place to be inclusive, safe, and excellent. If you can't uphold that, you don't belong here." She turned and walked toward her favorite corner booth. But before she sat down, she said one last thing. "Service, please." By the time Danielle finished her lunch, the internet had already started doing its thing. One of the customers who had quietly filmed the entire ordeal, from the denial to the dramatic firing, had uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "They told this black woman to leave, but she owns the restaurant. Watch what happens, racism exposed, black excellence." Within 3 hours, the video hit 200,000 views. By nightfall, it was everywhere. News outlets picked it up. Hashtags like Danielle Roberts, Maple and Sage, and She Owns It trended on Twitter. Some called her a queen, others called her an inspiration, and a few trolls, of course, claimed she was looking for attention. Danielle didn't care. She hadn't spoken to the media. Not yet. But behind the scenes, she was boiling. She sat in her condo that evening, watching the video on loop, tears quietly rolling down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from exhaustion. Not one person in that restaurant had stood up for her. Not one. Her phone buzzed nonstop, calls, interview requests, messages from strangers. But one call made her pause. Her grandmother. Danielle picked up immediately. "Hi, Nana." The old woman's voice was gentle but firm. "I saw the video, baby." Danielle's throat tightened. "You were grace under fire," Nana said. "But you listened to me, Danielle. You've been silent too long. You've been humble too long. Now speak. Tell your story." The next morning, Danielle walked into the restaurant early. This time, in a tailored black suit. Natural curls proudly out. No more hiding. A few of the remaining staff, now awkwardly quiet, watched her in awe. She barely acknowledged them. She had something else planned. By noon, she stood in front of the restaurant, flanked by two reporters, as dozens of cameras rolled. "I never wanted to go viral," Danielle said into the microphones. "I never wanted a moment like this. I wanted to build a restaurant where everyone could feel welcome. But yesterday, I learned that even in a space I created, I could still be told I don't belong, just because I'm black." Gasps. Shutters clicked. I was told I was aggressive for asking for a menu. I was told to leave for wanting lunch. I was nearly escorted out by security while white customers were served with smiles. She took a breath. "But I'm still standing. And now, I'm not hiding anymore." The crowd applauded. Danielle smiled faintly. "This place will change, and I hope my story reminds someone out there that you don't have to tolerate disrespect to keep the peace. Sometimes, peace comes after the storm." Just then, a young black girl in the crowd whispered to her mom, "She looks like me." And Danielle heard it. That made everything worth it. It had been 2 days since Danielle's press conference, and the restaurant felt like it was holding its breath. Half the staff had quit. The other half showed up, timid, quiet, and unsure how to act around her now that she wasn't just another customer. Danielle didn't care. She had new things to focus on, new hiring, a possible partnership with a civil rights nonprofit, and emails from school principals asking her to speak to their students. But nothing prepared her for what happened next. As she walked into the back office, she found a letter slipped under her door. It was handwritten. "Danielle, I owe you an apology. I saw everything before it happened." Danielle sat down, heart racing. Jessica and Claire had a nickname for black customers. They called them table zeros, meaning don't bother serving them unless it looks bad. I laughed along once. I hated myself for it later, but I was scared to speak up, scared I'd lose my job. "After seeing how you were treated and what you did after, I can't stay silent anymore. I'm sorry. I'll come tell you in person. I just need you to know you inspired me to be braver." No name was signed. Danielle's fingers trembled. She walked out to the kitchen and looked around. Her staff busied themselves, eyes low, except one. Tyler. White, early 20s, dishwasher, quiet, always polite. Danielle watched him. He didn't flinch. That afternoon, she called a staff meeting. "I received a letter today," she began, "from someone who admitted they stood by when they should have stood up." People shifted nervously. "I don't know who wrote it, but I hope they know this. Accountability matters, but silence kills more dreams than failure ever will. If you've been complicit, this is your time to make it right." No one said a word, but after the meeting, Tyler stayed behind. He stepped forward, eyes red. "It was me," he whispered. "I wrote the letter." Danielle stared at him. I wanted to be the good guy, but I laughed at their jokes, and I hated myself every shift after that. Danielle didn't respond at first. Then she nodded slowly. "I don't hate you," she said, "but if you're going to stay, you better become part of the solution." Tyler nodded. "I want to help rebuild." Danielle looked at him, eyes sharp. "Then prove it." And just like that, a new chapter began, not just for her, but for the people watching her rise. By the following weekend, the energy at Maple and Sage was completely different. Gone were the cold stares and hushed laughter. In their place, smiling new hosts, respectful staff, and a new sign on the door that read, "Diversity is not a trend, it's a standard." Danielle sat in her booth that morning, reviewing a guest list she'd been planning for weeks. Today wasn't about the press. It wasn't even about the restaurant. Today was about the girls. 13 middle school girls from local schools, black, brown, and brilliant, were coming for a special lunch she called Table of Power. Danielle had seen the online comments. She thinks she's a hero now. She's playing the race card. She's making it about color. But this was her answer. She wanted these girls to walk into a space that had once tried to push her out and see themselves in every corner of it. At exactly 1 p.m., the doors opened and the girls walked in, some shy, others wide-eyed. Each wore a sash with one word written across it: leader, visionary, healer, builder. The moment was beautiful. Danielle stood and greeted them like royalty. "Welcome to your table," she said. "You belong here." The girls beamed. Some hugged her. Others asked questions. She answered them all. "Do you ever get scared?" one asked. "All the time," Danielle smiled. "But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding to walk in anyway." They clapped. The staff served them with care. For once, every table in that room paused, not to stare, but to admire, until the door slammed open. Everyone turned. Jessica, the former manager, disheveled, red-faced, eyes full of something between rage and regret. "You destroyed my life," she shouted. "I lost everything because of you." The girls looked frightened. Danielle stood calmly. "You destroyed your own life, Jessica. I just held up the mirror." Jessica stepped forward, pointing. "You humiliated me. Online, everywhere. My kids can't even go to school without hearing about it." Danielle took a deep breath. The room was silent. "I didn't post those videos. I didn't force your words into your mouth. And I didn't fire you because you were white. I fired you because you were wrong." Jessica opened her mouth, but Danielle raised a hand. "And you will not ruin this moment for these girls. Not again." Tyler appeared from the kitchen and gently led Jessica out. Danielle turned back to the girls. "Ignore that interruption," she said with a warm smile, "because what she doesn't realize is you're the future, and the future doesn't apologize for standing tall." The girls cheered. A few even cried, and somewhere in that moment, healing began to bloom. The setting was luxury, a rooftop lounge in the city's financial district, velvet seats, gold trim, gentle jazz playing from unseen speakers. Danielle sat across from Michael Langston, a polished investor with a reputation for transforming restaurants into national brands. He'd flown in from Chicago just for this meeting. "So let me be direct," he said, sliding a leather folder across the table. "Your story has gone viral. Your restaurant is booked out for the next 4 weeks, and frankly, the press loves you." Danielle opened the folder. Inside, projections, expansion plans, and a $2.5 million investment offer. "I want to partner with you," Michael said. "We can franchise Maple and Sage in 6 major cities: Miami, Atlanta, LA. But," he leaned in slightly, "we need to clean the image a little." Danielle closed the folder slowly. "What does clean mean exactly?" Michael smiled like he was saying something reasonable. "We toned down the racial stuff. No more mentorship events. No more speeches about injustice. Just good food and clean marketing." Danielle stared at him, stunned. "I mean, we get it," he continued. "You had a moment. The world rallied. But now it's time to go neutral. Appeal to everyone. Focus on the business, not the politics." Danielle's stomach turned. "This is the business," she said softly. "The food, the people, the story. That's what makes it real." Michael shook his head. "Real doesn't scale. Safe does. And being seen as the race restaurant will limit you. You don't want that." Danielle leaned back, her voice firm. "Let me ask you something, Mr. Langston. Would you be here if I hadn't stood up and told the truth?" He blinked. "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point," she said. "You want the brand, the buzz, the bookings, but not the backbone it was built on. You want the fire without the smoke." Michael chuckled nervously. "I'm just saying." "No," Danielle said, standing. "You're saying you want my business without my identity, my story without my voice. And that's not for sale." She slid the folder back to him. "I'd rather serve 20 people who believe in what I stand for than 20,000 who'd rather I stay silent to keep their appetite." Michael sighed. "You're making a mistake." Danielle smiled. "Maybe, but it's mine to make, and it tastes like freedom." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on marble like punctuation marks in a declaration of purpose. Later that night, she posted one sentence on her social media. "I didn't build Maple and Sage to be digestible. I built it to be unforgettable." It went viral within hours. The lights backstage were warm. A soft hum buzzed in the background as audio checks echoed faintly. Danielle stood behind the curtain of a massive auditorium, rows of chairs packed with young entrepreneurs, students, and professionals. She'd been invited as the keynote speaker at the National Business and Leadership Conference. She stared at her note cards, her fingers trembling slightly. Not from fear, from everything it took to get here. Then, just as her name was announced, a voice whispered behind her. "Danielle?" She turned and froze. It was Claire, the hostess, the woman who once told her, "People like you always cause drama." Claire looked different now, less polished, tired, nervous. Danielle didn't speak. Claire stepped closer, voice shaking. "I don't want anything. I saw you were speaking here. I wanted to come and say I'm sorry. Truly." Danielle studied her. "I lost my job, my apartment. I deserved that. But I've been working on myself. I enrolled in an inclusion course. I joined a nonprofit kitchen. I learned things I never saw before." Danielle looked down, then up again. "Why are you really here, Claire?" Claire teared up. "Because the girl I used to be wouldn't have even listened to a woman like you. But now, I bring your name up as someone I admire, and I needed you to hear that." Danielle took a long breath. She didn't hug her. She didn't scold her. She simply said, "Thank you for telling me." Claire smiled faintly. "You changed me. I hope you keep changing more people." A staff member called, "You're up in 1 minute." Danielle nodded and turned toward the stage. As she walked out, the spotlight hit her. The crowd rose. The applause was thunderous. She reached the podium, exhaled, and began. "When I walked into my own restaurant and was told I didn't belong, I realized something. The world doesn't need more tables that are diverse in name only. We need tables built by people who were never invited to sit at one in the first place." The crowd quieted, locked in. I was humiliated in front of strangers. Then I chose to stand in that same space and rebuild it from truth. Today, I don't just own a restaurant. I own my story. And no investor, no social pressure, no fear can take that from me again. She paused. "If you've ever been told you don't belong, let me be the first to say it clearly and without apology." Her eyes scanned the room. "You do. You belong here." The audience erupted. Later that night, as Danielle sat alone, scrolling through thousands of comments, one message stood out. "I was that little black girl watching in silence. Thank you for showing me what power looks like." Danielle smiled, not because the world finally saw her, but because she never needed their permission to shine. What part of Danielle's story moved you the most? Comment, "You belong here," if this story inspired you. Let's fill the comments with power, truth, and healing. Your voice matters. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.